So, all three parties, mainly Europeans and Ukraine, Russians, and United States, they all have different objectives. One objective, obviously, is that everybody is looking what is going to happen to Ukraine war. So, Europeans at the moment, now this is again very interesting that something is being decided about Europe, European borders, European security, in which now you don't.
Europe is not involved.
As far as the UK is concerned, it probably has in Europe among the toughest lines against Russia. There's a history to it. And I'm not going to go back to the World War II, but recently you would have heard the Salisbury incident where two Russian dissidents were poisoned.
Because what Russia has really got out of this, one is they wanted to isolate Russia economically, politically, they wanted strategic defeat of Russia. Obviously, this is not what is happening now when, what President Putin is trying to portray, and perhaps may happen at the end of the summit, that I am for peace. President Trump is trying to bring peace, but it's the Europeans and Ukraine, those who are actually spoilers of this whole game.
But President Trump's meeting is also important for some other reasons, for the rest of the world, for India, for instance.
Absolutely.
Now we've got sort of threat of 50% sanctions kicking in on the 27th, 25% penalty for importing Russian oil. If there is a breakthrough or a modus vivendi found, then it would be good for India too. Someone or a group of people are with a wrecking ball, wrecking the India-US relationship built up assiduously over the last 3 decades or 2.5 decades. So I think, as I said earlier in one of the shows, there is a 17-year moment in India-US relations. 1971, you had the Seventh Fleet to come to the Bay of Bengal. In 1990,
that was basically a warning to us when we were cutting West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Yes.
In 1998, after our nuclear test, sanctions were imposed and relations were at their nadir. And now in 2025, I think it's probably again gone back. So it's cyclical. There is now a complete lack of trust as far as India is concerned. And I'm not talking about the government here. I'm talking about the people of India. You can see the reaction of the people of India. You see it in statements, in articles, in TV debates, etc. That sort of trust that was built up over decades has almost evaporated.
All countries in South Asia have domestic problems, yet they have international commitments as well. And of course, not needless to say that there are those ambitions as well, to play a more prominent role globally, regionally. It's a fact that Pakistan in the past 6 months, I would say, 6 months to a year, has managed to inch its way back towards the United States. One of the first things which got badly affected when Imran Khan came to power in 2018 was the China-Pakistan economic corridor. That completely froze. And that was the moment when 2017-18, when I believe that, the army under General Bajwa was thoughtful, and they thought that, we can't go entirely in Chinese pockets. We have to retrace our steps. One was economy and the other was counterterrorism. So these were two essential conversations which they were having even under Biden administration. The recent meeting does not mention Al-Qaeda and the Indian subcontinent at all. There is ISIS, there is TTP, and what seems to have happened because of the ongoing CT conversation, which never stopped, is that now there seems to be appreciation for Pakistan government's
role in counterterrorism.
On counterterrorism. They've included BLA and Majid Brigade and TTP as well.
The Trump-Putin-Munir tango. Why India is out of step. The US-Pakistan pivot and Russia's embrace. Hello everyone, I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express, our weekly look at events that impact India. This week, as the world remains shockingly silent on the ongoing genocide in Gaza, all eyes are focused on what's unfolding in Anchorage, Alaska, at the landmark summit between the President of the United States, Donald Trump, whom India had long considered a friend, And India's strongest ally, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, no longer the pariah, whose global standing gets a huge boost with this summit. There is some speculation that the meeting may have already hit a glacier over Ukraine's refusal to agree to a pre-summit land swap and a Europe that's been kept away, forced to stand in the sidelines. But hopes are running high. Despite Trump's threats of severe consequences if the Russian president doesn't agree to end the war, the UK Premier Keir Starmer says there's a viable chance for a ceasefire. For India, this is a summit set against the punishing 50% trade tariffs that Trump is threatening to impose on India for buying Russian oil. If the war ends, will it no longer be a problem? If the Putin-Trump equation gains credence, where will that leave Delhi? The failure or success of the Alaska summit will impact not just Ukraine, not just Europe, but clearly India as well. We're also looking at how Trump's pivot to Pakistan, how he's handed over a huge crumb to Rawalpindi when it declared Pakistan a phenomenal partner in counterterrorism efforts, signed a defense agreement and designated the Baloch Liberation Army and the Majid Brigade terrorist organizations. Trump has, alarmingly for Delhi, turned a deaf ear to Pakistan Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir's hate-filled nuclear bluster against India, issued while he was on US soil. We are a nuclear nation. If we go down, half the world goes down too, is what General Asim Munir said on his visit, claiming, as of course, in the middle of all of these claims and counterclaims of how many Pakistan Air Force jets had been destroyed, etc., etc. So the big questions: what gives? Why this pivot to Pakistan? Why is Donald Trump befriending India's biggest enemy? Where does that leave Delhi? 2, are we out of step with the Trump-Putin-Munir tango? And 3, post-Operation Sindoor and India's refusal to give Trump any credit for ending the war, was that a blunder? Do we have a strategy? Do we work our way back into Trump and Washington's good books? Or have we decided to thumb a nose at the world's waning superpower and befriend the Chinese wannabe? Talking to us today are a distinguished panel of experts: former ambassador to the UK and Sri Lanka, Yashwardhan Sinha, a former diplomat who has served in missions across South Asia, the Middle East, Europe, South America, and he was posted in India's permanent mission at the United Nations in New York as well. Until recently, the Chief Information Commissioner at the Central Information Commission in New Delhi, he's also served in Pakistan. Welcome, Ambassador Sinha. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, author of the definitive book on the Pakistan Army, Military Inc. Inside Pakistan's Military Economy, political commentator and prolific columnist. Dr. Siddiqa, who served as the inaugural Pakistan Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center, is a research associate at the School of Oriental and African Studies, South Asia Institute in London. Welcome, Dr. Siddiqa. Also with us is Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Professor of European Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, former chair of the Center for European Studies, awarded the Jean Monnet Chair by the European Commission, adept at integrating trade and economic issues with geopolitical realities, a huge asset in the current international environment. Welcome, Professor Sachdeva.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, Professor Sachdeva, even though I want to hear Yash's views very, very much. What is this Trump-Putin summit all about? Why did Putin agree to a summit? Does he want the war in Ukraine to end? Hasn't taking a huge part of Ukraine become the driving force behind his hold on power in Russia? Is Trump being led up the garden path by the Russian president? Putin wants not just the lands he has occupied, but other parts of Ukraine. Will Trump agree? He wants an end to the Western military aid to Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to be, I'm talking about Putin here. He wants Ukraine to be kept out of NATO. He wants a ceasefire, but Ukraine sees that as a move by Russia to regroup, replenish its fighting force, and possibly attack again at a later date. So Trump and Europe do not want a third world war, clearly. Is this summit going to be a sham, or will there be some movement on arriving at a mutually agreeable deal? Or is this, as somebody has written very cleverly today, is it Yalta 2.0? I don't know whether I'm mispronouncing it. By all accounts, Russia does want, Putin wants a return to the old Soviet sphere of influence.
Well, I think there are many questions. This is obviously is going to be very, very important summit, and summits of this nature are not. They don't happen just to talk, very few things because a lot of background work would have done by both the countries. Now, obviously, in this particular summit, all the Europeans and Ukraine at the moment they are out. So the initial summit will take place between President Trump and President Putin. And if that summit goes well, then perhaps there would be another summit between all three leaders. All three parties, mainly Europeans and Ukraine, Russians, and United States, they all have different objectives. One objective, obviously, is that everybody is looking what is going to happen to Ukraine war. Now, at the battlefront, obviously, Russia is in the upper hand. So they are not really so concerned about war at that point of time because they already have more than 20%, around 20% of Ukrainian territory under their control.
This includes very critical the eastern segment of Ukraine, which leads into the Crimea.
Absolutely. So, I mean, they have the Donbass, and then they also have, I mean, the two provinces within Donbass, and then also, certain parts of Zaporozhye and also, the Kherson region, and also, earlier from 2014, Crimea, which they are linking now with them. So, obviously, they are sitting pretty on that. But of course, Russia is also bleeding for the last more than 3 years. The war is on, and so Europeans at the moment. Now, this is again very interesting that something is being decided about Europe, European borders, European security, in which now you don't.
Europe is not involved.
I mean, you don't have Britain, you don't have Germany, you don't have France, the Brussels is out. So this is something very interesting. So, but of course, at this point of time, I think Americans, because President Trump wants to be a peacemaker. So for him, and he has been talking from the day one that he can finish the whole thing within a day. So for him, the first main thing is that at least there is some kind of ceasefire. And I think this is what exactly most of the Europeans are also looking because they see that Ukraine is not in a good position at this point of time. So if there is a certain ceasefire, so there is then later on they can talk about other thing.
But
Now,
Professor
as far
Sachin,
as
can the Russia be trusted to keep the ceasefire? Is that what they want?
well, I mean, it's not question of who is trusting whom. Here, the question is there is certain thing which is happening. Russia is already sitting on more than 20% of the Ukraine territory. Everybody is, for more than 3 years, they can't keep pumping money into Ukraine. So at least
Hmm.
there is some ceasefire. This is what they would like. And other things, obviously, they do not want to have any change in the borders as the Europeans are
Ah.
concerned. And Americans, they are not too much concerned about borders, etc., but they don't want to get perhaps into this at this point of time. Now, as far the Russians are concerned, if there is a ceasefire, it's okay with them. But they would like to, for them, Ukraine is just one of the talking points along many others. Because what Russia has really got out of this, one is they wanted to isolate Russia economically, politically, they wanted strategic defeat of Russia. Obviously, this is not what is happening now when, they have invited President Putin to Alaska and he's talking with the United States and others are out. So he has obviously been reinstated as a global statesman. He's got
Correct.
big thing.
That it is absolutely a big boost to Putin in many ways.
Absolutely. And then the second thing is now they want also reset their relations with the United States because they
Hmm.
feel that that's very important relationship. Particularly about arms control, they have about many, many other ideas, and of course, trade sanctions, everything else. So if Russians would agree to any kind of ceasefire, which is okay for them, but at the same time, they would like to extract certain price for that ceasefire. Now, what happens to particular territory? Now, obviously, they are not going to give up that territory, what they have really controlling now. Now, there
Hmm.
would be certain, I mean, initially when President Trump was talking, a certain kind of give and take as far the territorial concessions are concerned. And obviously, then Ukraine and the Europeans, they suddenly got alarmed that, I don't know what exactly, he's going to do about this. But I think at this point of time, and this is what later on, I think President Trump also, at some point, he mentioned that, this is, I'm not about territorial, exchanges, etc. This is what they will, talk with themselves. So he just want to have certain kind of ceasefire announcing that, okay, he has been able to bring peace to this particular conflict. Now, the rest of the thing, I think the Russians are not in a hurry. So for them, if they get certain things out of this ceasefire, it's good with them. It means it's going to be a success of this summit. If that doesn't happen, for them it's all right. Already they have been reinstated, and they'll continue fighting for the next, how many years. For them, they don't care about those issues. So
But
this is
did you also, I mean, would you also take into cognizance of the Istanbul peace talks that happened? At that point in time, Russia did make many demands. And this was something that the Europeans then rejected. So at this point in time, is that why Trump has kept the Europeans out of the game? Because he wants to, firstly, I think, bring this whole war to an end, and then I suppose, proceed with
the all
whatever
border
the give and
issues.
take.
This is what, in fact, the Russians have been saying for quite some time. That this is not about only about Ukraine and certain territory, but this is all they want. Their role within the European security architecture. They do not want extension of NATO to their borderlands. So they said we have
Yes.
certain specific concerns which they want to discuss with Americans. I think now they are willing to discuss Americans these issues. They are discussing with them. Europeans are not really, I mean, they are something different. So this is what, in fact, what President Putin is trying to portray, and perhaps may happen at the end of the summit, that I am for peace. President Trump is trying to bring peace, but it's the Europeans and Ukraine those who are actually spoilers of this whole game. And
Yeah.
so if some breakthrough happen, it's good for Trump and also for Putin. And I think ultimately the losers in this thing is obviously as the Europeans, because they are not there. And many things are going to be decided perhaps in which they will be just later on told that this is what we have agreed. So they just have to take it or leave it, or if they don't agree, then they will spoil this whole thing. Otherwise, they might have to just digest whatever the two leaders agree.
So, Ambassador, if I can bring you in on this, do you have a comment to make on the summit? Because there's a lot happening which involves the UK as well. Keir Starmer has made a couple of very very good comments, saying there could be a viable path to peace. But he's also hosting Zelensky today, and where does that leave European countries which have actually stood up against Russia and failed actually?
Thank you for having me. As far as the UK is concerned, it's probably has in Europe among the toughest lines against Russia. There's a history to it, and I'm not going to go back to the World War II, but recently you would have heard the Salisbury incident, where two Russian dissidents were poisoned uh, in a place called Salisbury near London, and that really set back relations because the Russians were squarely blamed, the Russian intelligence. So the UK has been taking a very strong line, and irrespective whether it's a conservative or a Labour government, but be that as it may, I think as far as the summit is concerned, all the parties want to end this war. But the question is on whose terms? Because as far as the Putin is concerned, he has to show that he is reasonable, that he is prepared to give peace a chance. He has already achieved a large part of the goals that he had in terms of territorial acquisition, but it has cost a lot of men and money, and it is this war has dragged on for 3.5 years. So I think everybody's interested in ending it. With President Trump, he has stood the U.S. policy on its head as far as Ukraine goes. So I think there is a possibility. I don't expect any major breakthrough, but even to the fact that they agreed to meet again to take this process forward, that would, I think, be positive. And as far as Ukraine and Europe are concerned, Ukraine will be filled in after the summit about what transpired and what is the roadmap, if they agree on a roadmap. Because I feel that Putin had made his maximalist demands. There's not much concession that he would be prepared to make. He could agree to a few sort of, giving up on certain tracts of land which are not so important from his point of view. But his objectives, the Russian-speaking areas, the links to Crimea, I mean the corridor or the land border to Crimea, that's been
That's right.
secured. That's been secured, and that he's not giving up for sure. In any case, Crimea was sort of taken over in 2014. But President Trump's meeting is also important for some other reasons, for the rest of the world, for India, for instance.
Absolutely.
Now, we've got sort of threat of 50% sanctions kicking in on the 27th, 25% penalty for importing Russian oil. If there is a breakthrough or a modus vivendi found, then it would be good for India too, because then we could be spared those so-called penalty sanctions of 25% for importing Russian oil. So I think not only India, but the rest of the world, basically everyone's watching closely what will happen tomorrow in Alaska. But I do hope that the process towards peace, and India has welcomed this meeting, and India would certainly welcome any positive outcome from this summit.
In fact, if I can come back to you, Professor Sachdeva, there's also a very interesting comment made by Michael Kugelman, the South Asia chair, Woodrow Wilson. He's been quoted as saying India has a strong interest in ending the war in Ukraine, even more so now than Trump is linking the war to his tariff policies by pressuring Russia into a ceasefire through punishing its top oil customers. So, as the ambassador rightly said, it does actually cut across not just Ukraine and Europe. Who are the others who are Russia's top oil customers? It includes Europe in a big way, doesn't it? So, will they wouldn't they also welcome an end to
Well, I mean,
this?
any kind of movement toward peace would be welcomed over anybody. But at this point of time, when they're saying the countries which are buying oil from Russia, mainly they're talking about China and India, and perhaps to some extent Turkey. I mean, the Europeans politically they have decided to move away from Russia, and they will continue to move away from Russia, even if they are buying certain amount of gas and oil. I mean, but I think that's not the one they are talking. They are talking about basically us. They are talking about China. So here already there are sanctions, as Ambassador mentioned, and in fact today, in fact, he mentioned that if there is no breakthrough, if some talks fail, then there'll be more sanctions on India as well. So
Mm,
this is in our interest that it happens. But the problem is that some of these move. I mean, some of these moves have already been backfired to an extent. I mean, it's not that India has said that now it will stop buying from them. Even the Europeans have, secondary sanctions on Yara energy. So, there is other kind of issues here involved. But, but this has, geopolitical, very different kind of implications because now we are seeing, so many people within India, they're talking. In fact, India has moved further towards Russia. And in fact, in our relations with China, you can see the Prime Minister is going to be China attending SEO summit. The Chinese foreign minister is going to visit India after a few days. So, things are moving in a very different direction. So, if these things continue to be like this, it will have a very serious implications for India's foreign policy, India's foreign economic relations in the years to come. So this is, but of course, not that India is underestimating its ties with the United States or but the way India kind of thinking of rebalancing China with the help of the United States, it also continue to be very important part of the Indo-Pacific narrative, and very strong technological, economic, and even military partnership with the United States. Now, many of those things are being questioned now. The way I think things are happening. So if things continue to be in direction, this will have very serious implications for other things. But if things happen that, if there is a breakthrough there, and after that second breakthrough, perhaps would be that if India also is able to, after that, have a trade deal with the United States, then things are in a maybe you will be able to balance certain things, but some damage has already been done on an Indo-US relations, and there is also I think there is realization that there is a misjudgment about the way Americans would move towards India. So many things are being, I would say, being rethought. And the India-China thing is something very, very important, which one has to see very carefully how things are going to move in that direction.
That's true.
Because anyway, they're
That's
very important trade partners of India. But only thing
that's
that
true.
technology and investment linkages with China are very limited, and China is very keen to develop those linkages with India. And if there is a minimum amount of trust which have been kind of created between India and China, things can move in a very different direction. And then we can, and of course, China and Russia working very closely together. So, there are so many angles to this story, but so everybody is seeing very carefully what is going to happen.
That's true. In a perfect world, let's see what happens. Ambassador, if I can come back to you, the Michael Kugelman also said that it was no surprise that Modi spoke to Putin and Zelensky on the eve of this Trump-Putin meeting. Is there any truth to what the Ukraine president told Prime Minister Modi when they spoke? He says that about the Russian exports. He basically said it's important that every leader who has tangible leverage over Russia sends the right signals to Russia. So that conversation is in the public domain. But what do you think would have been the main thrust of the conversation between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi? I mean, they're also going to meet, as Professor Sachdev said, at this SCO in China and at the end of the month. Was it India conveying the possibility of a rethink of its import of Russian oil, or was it? I mean, they sent someone as important as the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval to meet Putin. So he may have even reassured him that he's not going to cut the Russian imports in any way. And would he have also encouraged Russia to be more open to a deal on Ukraine?
Certainly, as far as encouraging Russia to move towards an agreement or a peace deal, that has always been our position, encouraging both parties, actually, not Russia only, both parties, encouraged to reach some sort of peace agreement. So that is something, and the whole thing we began with saying this is not an age of war, was basically to convey that make peace. So I think that was the whole intention. But whether our NSA will go all the way to Moscow to convey to President Putin that we are going to stop importing oil or we're going to lessen the quantity. I don't think so. I don't think you would require our NSA to go there to convey that message. I think it was also a visit that was due, which had been postponed earlier because the illness of the NSA,
That's true.
and
That's true.
also because some signaling has to be done. After all, as we said, we believe in multi-alignment. So the signaling is very important. And not only did the NSA go and meet Mr. Putin, but also now our EAM is going to Russia later this month, and the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is coming early next week. So I think there are multiple moves being made, and I don't think it should be considered a surprise because India doesn't want to keep all its eggs in one basket in any case. And with the behavior and the statements coming out, not just out of the White House, I was surprised to hear the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, make the statement about additional tariffs, etc. I mean, what is happening is that someone or a group of people are with a wrecking ball wrecking the India-US relationship built up assiduously over the last 3 decades or 2.5 decades. So I think, as I said earlier in one of the shows, there is this 17-year moment in India-US relations. 1971, you had the Seventh Fleet to come to the Bay of Bengal. In
And
1998,
that was basically a warning to us when we were
yeah,
cutting West
Pakistan.
Pakistan and East Pakistan.
And in
Yes.
1998, after our nuclear test, sanctions were imposed and relations were at their nadir. And now in 2025, I think it's probably again gone back. So it's cyclical. What I'm trying to say is that this relationship is very important and should, by both sides, be preserved and carefully nourished. But if one side decides to put a sort of set a wrecking ball on it, then there's very little the other party can do. We've been extremely restrained. And I saw this Washington Post article, which is nonsensical, about why India and the US are
No.
falling apart on this relationship, because we have been extremely restrained. In fact, the Prime Minister has not made any public statement really against the US or against any personalities, but the sort of uh, tirade that's come from the US, and I mean, well, a lot of epithets have been used which are not normally used among partners, among friends. But be that as it may, I think this is an important relationship, and both sides, I'm sure, are going to try and endeavor and to sort of see what how they can, if not preserve it, how can they retrieve it? Because there is now a complete lack of trust as far as India is concerned, and I'm not talking about the government here. I'm talking about the people of India. You can see the reaction of the people of India. You see it in statements, in articles, in TV debates, etc. That sort of trust that was built up over decades has almost evaporated. So it will take a lot of hard work on both sides, the part of both sides, to try and see what they can retrieve of this very important relationship as far as India is concerned, and certainly as far as the US is concerned too. But then we have to gauge the importance that the US attaches to this relationship. And the signs that we are getting are not very promising.
There's an added complication now, which is becoming a huge the elephant in the room basically. The U.S. Pakistan bonhomie, the U.S. pivot to Pakistan, and this Baloch terror tag which has been added. The verbal barrage from a U.S. backed Pakistan, has put India on the spot. It isn't just the U.S. Blackguarding India. It is now Pakistan being allowed, Pakistan's army chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir, also being allowed to, take off pot shots at India from American soil. What should our options be, when it comes to this? I mean, Ambassador, you've served in the Middle East. You've seen,
Pakistan and not the Middle East. And I've handled Pakistan for 10 years at MEA. But yeah, please go ahead.
exactly, exactly. And you handle that Afghanistan Pakistan desk in the MEA. And how is it all about replacing US boots on the ground with Pakistani troops? I mean, so many Pakistanis are already serving in the Gulf, Ambassador, as pilots, the UAE Air Force, the Saudi Armed Forces. How long can India afford to ignore Pakistan's nuclear saber rattling?
This is nothing new, Nina. I mean, there had been saber rattling in the past too. I don't think we should go overboard. I mean, as far as Field Marshal Munir is concerned, he was addressing the diasporas somewhere in the U.S. and he made that statement. And what surprises me is if the nuclear doctrine of Pakistan is that if they are cornered, they will use the nuclear they will use the nuclear alternative, the weapon, and take half the world down with them. I was quite surprised when I heard the Field Marshal Munir say that, and frankly, I was quite surprised because I've seen their doctrine. There was a General Khalid Kidwai some years ago who set out very clearly enunciated what the nuclear doctrine will be. Both the countries understood each other as what the nuclear threshold is, etc. But for Field Marshal Munir to go and say this, I mean, if I were the rest of the world, I would be alarmed. And as far as we are
Yeah.
concerned, I think we are aware of what the threshold is. I think Operation Sindoor even tested that threshold to some extent.
Dr. Siddiqa, if I could bring you in, welcome to the program. Would you like to comment on this bigger role that Pakistan looks as if it's expected to play by the US? I mean, it can't deal with its problems at home. It's got the Tehrik-e-Taliban in Swat. It's got the unrest in Balochistan, parts of Sindh. Is it punching above its weight, or does it really think it can deliver, to whatever it's asked to by the US?
See, remember one thing that starting from Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the idea of how would Pakistan attract global economy towards it, to flow towards it, was through using Pakistan's geographical location. And So connecting between Central Asia to the Middle East, Pakistan has a role to play. Now, that does not necessarily, I mean, by your definition, any country in South Asia, and including India, every country has domestic problems. So they shouldn't be playing any role. I mean, what role did India have to play in Quad because it has domestic problems as well? So I think these are two different baskets. One is domestic, uh, and the other is international. So countries would continue to do that. And so for Pakistan,
No, my point
so
basically,
so
Dr. Siddiqa, is not that. It was basically that the Pakistan army is being targeted by the Baloch rebels and by the Tehrik-e-Taliban, and is basically has a major
no, no,
challenge
this
on
is
its
I
hand. And
understand that.
fact is, if
No, no.
Pakistan comes back into the Middle East, it comes to play a role in the Middle East as the U.S. policeman, as the U.S.
See,
appointed
this is
police.
a conversation people are having. Nobody has discussed it. I mean, we haven't heard Trump mention it, you mention it, and Indian media is mentioning it. Right now, I mean, this is perhaps they've had a conversation on that. Uh, Pakistan, like Bangladesh, has major kind of commitment in the past to the UN. Countries, militaries do a lot of other things as well. I mean, it's a 600,000 strong force. So I'm sure not every person is committed in Balochistan, or just because it's being targeted in Balochistan doesn't mean doesn't play other roles. Um,
That's right.
so the point I'm trying to make is that, and all countries do that. All countries in South Asia have domestic problems, yet they have international commitments as well. And of course, not needless to say that there are those ambitions as well, to play a more prominent role globally, regionally. Um, it's a fact that Pakistan, in the past 6 months, I would say, 6 months to a year, has managed to inch its way back towards the United States. And this is something which didn't start now. I would also want to point out this is something which Pakistan's military had aimed at starting from 2017. I mean, let me remind you that one of the first things which got badly affected when Imran Khan came to power in 2018 was the China-Pakistan economic corridor
Uh-huh.
that completely froze. And that was the moment when 2017-18, when I believe that, the army under General Bajwa was thoughtful, and they thought that, we can't go entirely in Chinese pockets. We have to retrace our steps, get back. And the one conversation they had during Biden administration, it was still ongoing, was one on economy, and the other was the one was economy and the other was counterterrorism. So these were two essential conversations which they were having even under Biden administration. The United States had, something for, some engagement, important engagement with Pakistan on Afghanistan, on TTP. There is Daesh, ISIS sitting in
That's
Afghanistan.
right.
Uh, and then, of course, there is the Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. The recent meeting does not mention Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent at all. There is ISIS, there is TTP, and what seems to have happened during because of the ongoing CT conversation, which never stopped, is that now there seems to be appreciation for Pakistan government's
Role in
policies.
counterterrorism.
Yeah, on counterterrorism. They've included BLA and Majid Brigade and TTP as well.
Will that have some kind of a blowback on India? Because I mean, the fact is that Pakistan has consistently accused India of, fomenting terror. I mean, whether, India, which India has, of course, consistently also denied. But do you think Pakistan will tar India with that brush?
See, Pakistan will continue to do that. And Pakistan has another card to play with, which
Mm-hmm.
is India's involvement in Canada, in the United States against the different Sikh groups, Sikh individuals. And the
Mm.
case it is broadly making, which then gets heard abroad, is that look, you constantly accused us of being of fomenting terrorism, but look, here is India, your once upon a time favorite, and that does the same. And because it is happening on Canadian and American soil, that does get publicity of what Pakistan. I mean, let me quickly remind you that when India or Indian agencies did carry out their operations in Pakistan, claimed it that they had hit on Lashkar-e-Taiba operatives. Hafiz Saeed's residence was attacked as well. And Pakistan kind of uh, shouted and cried about it. Now, nobody around the world paid any attention. A,
Why is that?
because, well, because these were terror groups which were
Mm.
named in the UN list, right? It's not that they're not terror groups. But the other thing is that because it was then between India and Pakistan, nobody noticed
Yeah.
until India started to operate on so-called friendly soil abroad, which you don't do. Uh, and that's when it got noticed. And that's when Pakistan put its voice along with others saying, see, we've been telling you, they are capable of doing that. So this is where it is. But your question, the reason I brought this discussion in is that really it's not just between India and Pakistan. It's a larger relationship between United States and India. So
So why
if
has it soured for India and the US, Dr. Satika? I mean,
uh,
and it looks as if Pakistan's floating on a cloud.
it is. I mean, we, who are Pakistan observers, Pakistanis write about Pakistan, have a concern as well that, it's a relationship which is kind of speeding up too fast, too soon, kind of a thing. And with Trump, with Donald Trump, who can change his mood any day, to sustain, it will be a pressure. So I think a number of reasons why it has grown with Pakistan and gone down with India. One is perhaps clearly an ego issue. It's
Mm.
Trump's ego versus Mr. Modi's ego kind of a thing. Um, Pakistan has gone out of its way to recognize that America and Mr. Trump played a role in the ceasefire, which it probably did. Then, nominating him for the Nobel Prize from the army chief to Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, everybody nominating Mr. Trump. So that should
Yeah.
make him very happy. Then what they've done is also get close to Trump's family. I mean, from what I've heard, couple of months before Pahalgam, there was a meeting in Abu Dhabi with one of Trump's sons and his partners, Witkoff, etc. They
Son.
yeah. No. They had a meeting with Trump's son.
Trump's son, and apparently
Yeah,
Witkoff's son was also involved in that
yeah, right.
cryptocurrency.
Okay. So then, they were invited to Pakistan. They were given special treatment and a conference on mines and minerals. I mean, Pakistan has now invited United States to invest in an area which was close to China's heart.
Mm.
Uh, and rare earth minerals is what America is looking for, where China right now has a clear advantage over the United States. So this is being offered to the US. So ego, crypto, mines and minerals, and of course, it's a guarantee that we this will be at the cost of the Chinese. And moreover, I think what Pakistan has done is, eager to play some role, cooperate on Iran. Perhaps
Yes.
there's a conversation going on there. They've taken a complete back seat on Gaza and Palestine. I mean, of course, there are these official statements which are neither here or there, but this recent conference that um, Asim Munir went to, it had 8 other army chiefs, including that of the Israeli Defense Forces. Some quite conversation is happening. Not that Pakistan is about to jump into, I mean, nor is Saudi Arabia. Right now, with the Gaza going the way it's going, no Muslim country can afford it. But definitely to calm them down, to ensure that the streets in Pakistan are under control. I mean, I was laughing with a Pakistani friend. I said, look, we have more demonstrations in London pro-Palestine than you can ever imagine in Pakistan. I mean, people are there's a real crackdown when people come out in support of Gaza and Palestine. So a lot of conversations are happening between Islamabad, or let me correct myself here, between
Rawalpindi.
Rawalpindi and Washington on the one hand, and fewer conversations now happening between Washington and New Delhi.
Mm.
The
On
conversation,
that
yeah,
On that point, I'd like to actually bring in Professor Sachdeva, because you've also talked about in the past about how rare earths in the Ukraine was actually something that Zelensky was forced to offer Trump. Is this rare earths and minerals and this hunt for rare earths and minerals almost universal? I mean, it doesn't apply just to Pakistan offering it, and the fact is that there's in the Arabian Sea also there are oil reserves. All of this is being offered to the Americans, and I mean, does India have anything similar to lure America in?
Well, there are a large number of issues where India and United States work together. I think many of those things still continue to be there. And I think, as Professor Siddiqa has mentioned, Pakistan has always used its geographical advantage. So whenever Americans were active in this region, whether when they were in Afghanistan or now they are looking certain kind of thing with Iran and other thing, Pakistan becomes important. And military relationship between Pakistan and United States has been very, very close for decades. So, this is not a secret. Everybody knows about this. But only thing is that in the last few years, when the focus was more on China, this whole Indo-Pacific narrative, and Americans were out of Afghanistan, so suddenly Pakistan was not really on the radar screen. And then now things have changed very, very differently in the last few weeks or few months under President Trump, where, different kind of issues, from tariffs to rare earth minerals and egos, etc., many things. So what perhaps overall perhaps would have, I would say, there was certain misjudgment from the Indian policy makers how to deal with this new situation in the United States. Not that the fundamental factors have really changed in any way, because many of the things which brought India and United States closer, they continue to be there. And that's why India has, as Ambassador Sinha was mentioning, still, all kind of things are happening in the United States. Still, India is hopeful of ultimately achieving, trade deal with the United States. And India has not made any provocative statements against the United States compared to the kind of thing which are coming from the United States, because they do feel that it's an important relationship. And in the present situation, if Pakistan certain ways becomes important, I think that's not really should be too much worrying for India. Maybe in certain domestic channels, etc., people talk about this. But the larger point for India really is that if the global understanding of United States about China and the transatlantic relationship, and the leadership at the global governance institutions, etc., if that continue to be the same, India will continue to be very, very important for them, because that's what things have built over years now. Now, if that changes fundamentally, they just move out from this. They don't want to play any role with Europe or against China, etc. Then, of course, India is have to think very seriously. How do you deal? Of course, it's an important relationship, trade, technology, etc. But then we also have to not just signaling. Perhaps things may go even beyond signaling with other countries as well. And also
Yeah.
within this region, I mean, for certain time, Pakistan will continue to be important for China. For some time, it has become important for the US. But that's not really, I think, fundamentally going to affect India's relationship with the United States.
Ambassador Sinha, if you could come in and talk to us about, you've handled Pakistan for so many years. What do you see as the way forward? What is going to happen if Pakistan is sitting in America's lap, so to speak? What happens to the India-US relationship? I mean, this is India has called Pakistan's nuclear bluff during the 4-day war, and despite all the claims of, going the Rafales going down, the Sukhois going down, and the MiGs going down, and Pakistani aircraft going down, it is a standoff almost, isn't it?
Nina, I don't see this as a zero-sum game. In fact, when was Pakistan really estranged from the United States? As far as the Pentagon is concerned, they always had links. Yes, so politically, things weren't very good the last decade or so, especially after Osama was taken out near Abbottabad. But I think the relationship between the two sort of countries have always been good, not as good as it was earlier, not excellent. So this is like a ebb and flow, and I don't see it as a zero sum game. But I just wanted to. I remember in 2010, just before Dick Holbrooke died, I had accompanied our special envoy to Washington, and we had a meeting in the Pentagon. And at that time, I was the head of the division dealing with Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. And I think Michel Fournoy was our interlocutor, and there was the top brass at the Pentagon. And I think the point was being made that you're not dealing with the democratically elected governments of Pakistan, and you deal with GHQ all the time. And that is why democracy is not taking roots in Pakistan. And of course, they denied it strenuously. And I recall asking, not so innocently, could anyone in the room name the defense minister of Pakistan? And there was a very embarrassed silence. If I remember correctly, it was Chaudhry Mukhtar at that point of time. But anyway, so be that as it may, I think there has always been that link. So it's not a zero sum game. And to what Dr. Siddiqa said about egos, as far as India is concerned, we've been very, very restrained. It's actually a one-sided fusillade that's coming from Washington in terms of dead economy, and I did this and I did that, and I mean, so the point is we understand the importance of the India-US relationship. We understand that the US is the most preeminent power, and we have a very, like Professor Saideva said, a cross-cutting relationship across various fields. So I think obviously for us it is going to be very important to try and preserve the relationship, if not preserve, at least to retrieve the relationship from the damage that's being done. But on the other hand, we are not going to be overtly bothered whether Pakistan is sitting in America's lap, because frankly, they've always done it. We've handled that for so many years. I mean, during the Cold War, and right from the inception, from our when the partition, when the pacts were formed, the Baghdad Pact, Seattle, etc.
But things had changed a little bit, Ambassador, after the nuclear deal. The 2005 arrangement that was reached with the US. I mean, the ties with the US and India had actually, seen an
Of course,
uptick.
not even before the nuclear deal, but certainly it was after our nuclear tests and the Talbot just once in talks, and then Clinton's visit, which is very significant in
Yes,
2000,
yes.
if I remember. So obviously, the last 3 decades, as far as India and the United States is concerned, we have built a very close partnership. Now we have to see where we go from here, because if like that, I think the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was quoted in, I think, papers saying that, well, if the things don't go well in Alaska, maybe there'll be additional secondary sanctions on India. I mean, it's
Mm,
bizarre that you have a problem with Moscow, and China has given a 90-day sort of let off. That talks will
that's
happen
right.
after 90 days, and Turkey, of course, has not even mentioned. And then Europe buys all that gas, much more in terms of value than what India buys from Russia. And that, of course, is ignored, because and that is the hypocrisy. So that is where
So,
we are faced with this conundrum, which we will handle, because we are not a country that can be trifled with. We don't go around sucking up, to one part or the other. So I think we have enough self-respect to, even if we have to take pain for a while, we'll take it. But at the same
mm,
time, we will persevere, because we believed, and I think everybody in India believes, that the India-US relationship is too important for it to be, cast aside to the whims and fancies and utterances of one or two or three people.
That's very interesting. Concluding remarks from each one of you, please. Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, we can start with you. Do you think that this is going to be a tightrope walk for both India and Pakistan? Because India is also trying to balance its relationship with China and with the United States, just as Pakistan is.
You know, I keep having these conversations with friends in Pakistan, and I keep telling them that, look, India is an important state, and eventually, it can't be ignored. Now, having said that, we don't know what more damage that Donald Trump will do. And it has, I mean, from a point, when you mentioned signing of the nuclear agreement to India being made member of the Quad, and, it was like there is India with a role, a more central role to play in American strategic thinking. It is definitely a step back. And I think it is possibly a wake-up call. I think there were a few gaps in Indian policy, and those gaps being that India tried too quickly to become part of the North instead of
Hmm.
hanging
The
on
South.
to where its strength lies, the South. And that is what it needs to work with, its own region in particular. I mean, after Pahalgam and Operation Sindoor, of course, there were some visits, but not visible visits to South Asia. South Asia, the South in general needs to be kind of, uh, you know, that's where India needs to bring itself back. See, as far as Pakistan is concerned, as a Pakistani, I'm worried. Honestly, it's this, this excitement which gives the military the confidence uh, of being more powerful than the politicians. This is a relationship which is going to have an impact on future of Pakistan's politics. And we
And
don't
also
know.
because Dr. Siddiqa's relationship with the Taliban isn't as hunky-dory as it was in the
No, no,
past.
no, 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 it's not. But the thing is that this is where something with the Pakistani military had wanted. It wanted the American imagination reinvested in Central
Hmm.
Asia and Afghanistan. It wants
Yes, it
that
would.
partnership. So, and that it may be kind of partly succeed in doing. Um, Trump right now is interested. And I think the wild card here, both for India and Pakistan, in a way, good for however each side works with it. The wild card is Donald Trump. You don't
Hmm.
know what his mood is tomorrow. There is something which has ticked him off completely with India. It's more serious than people would like to give it a thought in Delhi. Of course, it's an important relationship. Of course, you have technology transfer, you have many other layers of this relationship. I completely appreciate it. But here is one man who's the president of the United States, who's going to be there for another at least three and a
3 years.
half years, at least 3 years, and who's very angry. Now, on the other hand, we in Pakistan seem to be overjoyed. We're benefiting, we're becoming more prominent. We think that we've become kind of more important, uh, globally, geopolitically, and this actually, if somebody was thinking more constructively, it does provide Pakistan the space to rebuild
Hmm.
itself, its economy, uh, its politics. Unfortunately and sadly, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
Either the economy getting a constructive boost from within, or the politics getting a constructive boost from within. And part of the problem is that this entire US-Pakistan relation has so strengthened the military that it looks at issues, even domestic issues, militarily, not politically.
That's very well put. Professor Sachdeva, you have your concluding remarks?
Well, I
Is
think,
it?
yeah, the fundamental shifts are taking place globally now. And the way I think we have looked at Indian foreign policy and India's foreign economic relations in the last 10, 15 years, we thought that's the kind of trajectory which will continue for another 10, 15, 20 years. Things are changing very fast. So, of course, we will be able to adjust. It's not that something India is incapable of. And even if, the way I think certain damage has already been done to Indo-US relations, India would be able to perhaps make certain amendments. But I think what I can see now that as a result of many of these developments, I think the geopolitical currents have already started shifting somewhere else. And where they stop, how do they go, what kind of combinations are going to be, how India is going to react, how others are going to react. There are many moving things in this puzzle, but things are changing and we have to really adjust very, 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 I would say, sensibly. So far, I think we have done our relationship with the China and with other countries in a very, very mature manner. And that's the same we are doing also at this point of time with the United States. But it will have its implication, whatever has happened. And we'll have to adjust to all those, our narratives, our policies to that reality, which is actually beyond our control, but we have to do that adjustment.
Ambassador, final word to you. Do you think Modi should actually pick up the phone as he has? He's called Putin, he's called Zelensky. Why is it that he's hesitant to call Donald Trump and make the kind of gesture that is needed? Because he is going to be in September. He's going to be addressing the UNGA, sorry, at New York. Is that the moment that he should, you think, reach out to? You know, the fickle transactional Donald Trump.
I mean, I don't know what is an imponderable, whether Prime Minister goes for the UNGA and whether there is a meeting with President Trump, but I would think that that would provide an opportunity. And as far as picking up the phone and calling, I don't think there has been any hesitation at all. In fact, on the 17th of June, when they spoke, it was President Trump who called him in Calgary and wanted him to come to the White House to ambush him with Field Marshal Munir. But
That's right.
what is forgotten is that the Prime Minister had a pre-arranged official visit to Croatia, the first by an Indian Prime Minister on the way back. Now, to expect India, the Indian Prime Minister, to go running to Washington, reschedule his meeting in Croatia, was expecting too much, I think, and that's not how diplomacy is done. So perhaps India, as I said, India is not a banana republic. So you cannot behave with India like that. As far as egos are concerned, I'm sure Prime Minister Modi will be very happy to speak to. You forget the first term. You remember Howdy Modi. You remember the welcome in Namaste Trump in Ahmedabad at the Motera Stadium there. So I think there is no problem as far as that. President Trump himself keeps saying, though he hasn't said it of late, and how good a friend Prime Minister Modi is. So I think when we reduce it to personalities, then we are able to find some reason or the other for. But there is something more than that. I mean, we should also look at what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, his frustration in inability to broker a peace. And I hope I'm wrong tomorrow. Something emerges from the summit. But I think we have to look at the larger picture. And I think this will also pass. These are phases in relationships between countries. And I'm sure we'll sort of get over this hump too, if not too distant future. So I think
Thank
I
you.
am not very worried. Of course, we are unhappy about where things have turned, but I don't think we need to be unduly worried either. And wherever there is a course correction required, I'm sure that course correction will be undertaken.
Thank you very much. But obviously, pushing India around, an India that has successive US administrations had built up as a strategic partner, is mystifying. We still don't know exactly what went wrong, and we still don't understand whether this is another theory that is being floated that the US is mollycoddling Pakistan so that it counters India's rise as a South Asian power and weans India away from Russia. which is a whole different argument altogether. So many moving parts. This is India at the crossroads, and we'll have to see which path it takes. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sinha. Thank you, Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, and thank you big time, Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, for your insight on Russia, for all your insights. Thank you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please click on the new Indian Express website and subscribe to the Global Express.